So the objective of this video is to discuss a little bit the solution of the exercise that you have seen in the in-class activity number 1. So first of all, the first task of the Nexpress case was to draw the organizational chart, which was essential because, as we discussed, business processes then cross different departments, so knowing the organization is fundamental. As you can see, and as we also discussed in class, there are basically 4 departments which are in staff, so information technology, human resources, secretariat and general office, control, administration and finance, and the 3 departments are the so-called primary or first line department, which are marketing, sales and operation. According to the text, you have also a further description of this department, because marketing has 2 different units: promotion, advertising and customer service, and operation is distinguished in supply chain, manufacturing and technical area. You also have a further distinction of information technology in corporate ERP website. I haven't included here to not make this representation too heavy, but of course you can let's say detail this representation as much as you want to represent what is staff and what is line. Then I also ask you to represent the human effort, including the human workforce, including in each department. I have summarized here the situation of some of the main departments. You can do that for almost everyone. So in the customer service there are 3 employees plus of course the director of the unit, so 4 people. The manufacturing has 1 manager on top, and then 6 employees and 140 operator on the line, so 147. The technical area has 1 manager on top, and then 2 further distinctive unit, R&D and after sales. Here there are 7 designers, here there are 2 employees, 7 plus 2 is 9, plus 3, let's say, managerial line, 12 people. Having drawn the organizational chart also give you an idea of the company value chain, because as I told you, everything that is on staff usually represent support processes, while instead everything that is in first line is primary processes. And that's what you see depicted here. So that's the Nexpress value chain, when you have the administrative processes like secretariat and general office, human resource management, information technology, control, administration and finance, which are secondary activities. And in the main value chain, like in the primary process, you have marketing, operation and sales. In particular, the request was also to highlight where the focus of the case is. The focus of the case is on sales, because the objective is to analyze the after sales process, which is of course a sub-part of the sales process, as one of the primary activities, one of the primary process of Nexpress. Starting from that, the first request was to realize the, let's say, hierarchical diagram of the after sales process. According to the, let's say, information provided in the text, your object of the analysis is the after sales assistance process, which is composed, so this is the notation to say this process is composed by 1, 2, 3 sub-processes. One is the request for assistance and initial assessment. The second one is the assessment of the necessary intervention. And the third one is the implementation of the solution. So these are the 3 main sub-processes that compose the after-sale assistance macro process. And then in the case, you see that the request for assistance and the implementation of the solution can be executed in 2 different ways. So here you find variant in 2 different way, according to, in this case, if the assistant comes through the call center or through the TAC. So the request of assistance is managed in a different way if the customer is calling through the call center or is going physically through a TAC. and the implementation of the solution, so the satisfaction of the customer request, is differentiated if the customer wants a repairment or a replacement of the coffee machine. This gives you exactly a representation of the after-sale assistance. So that's the process under the analysis. There are three main macro phases of this process, 1, 2, and 3. Two of these macro phases can have two variants. So this is a clear representation of this process. Now, this is a static view of the process. The next step is, okay, but how these processes interact, these macro phases interact within each other. That's why the synchronization diagram comes after. I repeat, as told in class, the synchronization diagram should include 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 processes, so all the processes that are included at the last level of the hierarchy diagram. In this case, assessment of necessary intervention is the last level because there is nothing after, but for request for assistance and initial assessment, the process to be included in the synchronization diagram are the two variants for request for assistance and the two variants for the implementation of the solution. The synchronization diagram, again, can be different according to the assumption that you made or how you reason about that, but something reasonable can be the one that you see represented here. So the process starts when there is a request for assistance, and let's say the first, decisional point is distinguishing between where the customer is requesting assistance. In one case, the customer can request the assistance from the call center, and so this process will take place, or they can request the assistance in the TAC. In this case, this process will take place. The first modeling that you can do is that in case the problem is complex or not, it can be like on the phone, solved directly, and so the process ends with the generic assistant. If instead the process requires further analysis, you have to go to the next one, which is the assessment of the necessary intervention by phone. And instead, in case of the if the assistant is through the TAC, there is no assessment of a necessary intervention because the customer is already in physically in the point of sales, so it's just there. Like the assessment can be done directly in this process. But of course, if generic assistance is needed, the customer is just his request solved very quickly and the process ends. Then once it's figure out that the customer need something hard in assistance, we need to figure out first if its coffee machine is under warranty or not. If it is under warranty, we can then offer repairment or substitution. If it's not under warranty, we need to find something else which is not model in this case, so the process ends. In case it is under warranty, the solution can be twofold. It can be repair through the TAC or substitution through the TAC, so repairment of the copy machine or substitution of the wall equipment. After that, of course, we have to let's say include the scenario that the customer is not satisfied because the problem is not solved. If the problem is solved, the process ends as customer satisfied. If the problem is not solved, the customer ends being dissatisfied. Of course, we have to take care of that and maybe have a recycle somewhere in the process. Now, this is the point of start with what we have seen being the process mapping, because then, of course, each of these processes included here need then a detailed mapping of the business process through the business process modeling notation. So the hierarchy tells you how a process is organized in macro, a macro process is organized in sub processes. The synchronization diagram tells you how the processes are organized and interact within each other, so which are the interdependence of between processes. Then the last step is by taking any process, you need to understand how each process works. So you have to do the business process modeling notation, representation to the business process modeling notation of each one. Like the one that you did last week with the request for quotation. Now, I know that, most of you didn't realize the correct one, but it was perfectly making sense, because you just need to practice like that. But this is the correct, this is one of the correct representation of the business process modeling of the request for quotation. Again, as I told you in class, this is not the unique, so you can have other variants as far as let's say the business process modeling notation syntax is respected. So the process starts with the customer that prepare the RFQ through an activity and send it to the supplier. So there is a throwing event that is received by the supplier, and the supplier catch the RFQ, and that's what the process. That's when the process starts with on the supplier side. That first run a reputation check. If the reputation check of the customer is not okay, they need to send a notification of refusal, so they cannot answer this request for quotation, and so the customer is notified and the process on the customer side ends. If it is okay, then they first have to check the stock availability. So this is a parallel gateway, so they happens both. So check stock availability, and then according if it is foreign or not foreign, they schedule a delivery date. And once all these decisional noise have been solved, the supplier is able to realize a quotation to be sent, throwing event and catching event. So a throwing event on the supplier side is a catching event on the customer side. So it sends a quotation which you received by the customer, who then evaluate the request for quotation and or send a refusal, and the supplier receives a refusal and the process sends on both sides, or send let's say accept the quotation and send an order which is received, and then follow up by a confirmation which is received and the process ends. Or if the supplier if the customer takes more than 48 hours to evaluate the quotation, then the supplier considers this quotation aborted and send an abortion message, which is then received by the customer, which then makes the process ending. Now, the most important things to be highlighted here is the difference between, you see that you have a lot of message, message events. So usually what you have hard time in understanding is distinguishing between when there is an activity and when there is a message event. This is the perfect representation of that. So here you have prepare RFQ and receive RFQ. Why for the customer is an activity, for the supplier is an event. Because whenever you think it's something that requires an execution of complex activities, so preparation of RFQ involves multiple steps. So you need to open the system, type the characteristic of the quotation that you want to obtain from your supplier, include the parameters, sending out to all the possible invited suppliers. So it's a complex activity, so it needs to be modeled as an activity. For the supplier, it's just an act, they receive the RFQ. Okay, so they know that this customer have sent and prepared an RFQ, and you have just to read it and then understand if to go on or not. So this is an event. The same here. So the supplier prepare a quotation through checking stock availability and schedule the delivery date. Once it's that, they can send the quotation including this information. The customer first receive the RFQ, so which is the act. Okay, they receive the RFQ, and then they evaluate the RFQ, which requires more activity. They have to receive, they have to compare, they have to make some analysis, maybe involve more people. So this is an activity that needs to be separated. You cannot include all of these in a single catching event, and you cannot just eliminate this event just by putting this arrow in evaluate RFQ, because the fact that you have received an RFQ from a system perspective is something which is recorded. All of these instead are all message. So they send refusal, means just like typing an email, sending a refusal, and they receive the refusal. So this can be modeled as simply like catching and throwing events. What if you would have modeled this like throwing event as activity? Is not an issue. You are just like overcomplicating a process when something can be modeled as a message instead of an activity. Of course, you make the process lighter. So modeling a throwing event as an activity is not a big deal. Definitely catching events need to be modeled as catching events, because receiving a refusal is not an activity. It's like an event that happened in the process. But again, you just have to get used to this. Now you have, I've seen some of you like modeling these in different ways, by hand, using PowerPoint, using whatever you want. Like there is a tool which can conveniently use to map the business process in a smart way, which is Signavio. So the next step that I'm expecting from you is to open the tutorial for accessing Signavio, how to access Signavio, and by next week, before the Tuesday class, map this process, so exactly as it is in this slide, map this process in Signavio to start, let's say, being sensitive about how Signavio works, how to use the different objects in Signavio, and then on Tuesday we will make a real exercise, starting from a description of a process. You will try to map it in Signavio from scratch, without like being given like the model already done.